Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, the leader of the continent's top crude oil producer apologises to the country for fuel shortages. President Muhammadu Buhari says the race is also on to resolve a national grid failure. Also, Uganda's army says it's killed a key commander of the notorious ADF militia in DR Congo. Ugandan troops have been working with the Congolese military in a crackdown operation on Islamic State-linked groups that's accused of killing thousands since the late 1990s. And the climate and soil of Eswatini makes it ripe for chili cultivation. One Colombian woman seized an opportunity to turn up the entrepreneurial heat by setting up a company that makes hot sauces. We hear from our correspondents who went to have a closer look. But first, after weeks of queues at the pumps and days of electricity blackouts in parts of the country, Nigeria's president apologised to the nation about prolonged fuel and power shortages. Earlier this week, utility companies warned of a total system collapse after a nationwide grid failure. Emergency measures were put in place over the outages, but rocketing fuel costs and a lack of petrol continue to put a strain on Nigerians. Samuel Okoye tells us more.
Nigeria, Africa's largest oil producer, is battling one of its worst energy crises. For more than a month, the country has faced acute petrol scarcity. The few petrol stations where fuel is available have been witnessing chaotic scenes, with motorists forming long queues that sometimes stretch for more than a kilometer. Many companies that rely on diesel and petrol have been forced to shut down or to scale down their operations. The government has blamed the petrol scarcity on the importation of adulterated fuel, which has withdrawn from circulation. Authorities have been unable to fulfill numerous promises that fresh petrol is being imported to end the scarcity. Despite its position as Africa's largest oil producer, Nigeria has been importing petrol in recent years because none of the 4 government-owned oil refineries are operational. There is the belief that some people do not want the refineries to work, so a lucrative petrol importing business can thrive. Nigeria often experiences petrol scarcity, partly because the country relies on imported fuel. As Nigerians hope for an end to the current scarcity, the country's national grid collapsed twice last week, leaving most parts of the country without electricity. The consequence is that Nigeria's energy crisis has gone from bad to worse. The situation is so bad that President Muhammadu Buhari has apologized to the nation for the inconveniences Nigerians are facing.
Sam Olakoya there for us. Now, France 24 and our sister radio station RFI have been ordered off the air in Mali. The country's ruling junta has suspended broadcasts until further notice over our coverage of accusations of civilian abuses by the Malian army. France has called the ban an attack on freedom of the press, and the European Union's also condemned the decision. It comes amidst worsening diplomatic relations between France and Mali in the wake of its military's takeover in 2020. In other news, Sudan saw its third and largest protest of the week in Khartoum on Thursday. Demonstrators braved tear gas and soldiers as they marched on the presidential palace, denouncing the economic crisis that's worsened in the country since a coup in October. The power grab saw billions of dollars in foreign aid suspended, and the protest movements gained fresh momentum as energy and food prices continue to climb daily. Rallies were also reported in Port Sudan, Gadares, Atbara, and other cities across the country. Now, earlier this week, joint Ugandan and Congolese forces claimed to have killed a key ADF militia commander. Abu Aden reportedly died in a battle at Malalu, along with half a dozen of his fighters. Now, months of a joint military operation may be pushing extremist militants further inland. Operation Shuja began last November to crack down on ADF fighters who've killed thousands in eastern DR Congo since the 1990s and carried out a wave of bombings in Kampala last year. Our correspondent, Bastien Renouy, spent time with the troops as they headed out. He sent us this report.
These Ugandan army trucks are about to enter the Democratic Republic of Congo. The convoy will support troops tracking down the ADF, an armed group active in North Kivu and Ituri provinces.
This is a military convoy which is taking logistics and materiel to the forward operating bases in Boga and Kainama. They are armored vehicles because you never know what could happen where there are ADF rebels that we are hunting in DRC. So anything can happen.
To reach their base in Kainama, they have to cross a river that marks the border and then take this road, which was built by the army for another 80 kilometers. Ugandan forces are on patrol around villages here, but only a few Congolese soldiers can be seen. These houses were deserted after militia indiscriminately killed villagers across the region. We stop in Shabi, where the head of the local administration has been back for a week.
People are starting to come back here. The governor has asked me to take up my post again, now that the Ugandan army, in coordination with the Congolese army, is ensuring our security.
The Ugandan army has set up an advanced camp just a few kilometers away. It's where the general in charge oversees operations.
The operational objective is to destroy the ADF capacity to make war, to degrade their capacity to make war. That's our operational objective. And the strategic objective, of course, is to create that peaceful environment to have smooth trade run between the two countries.
He says that the militia are being pushed away from the border, and then Congolese forces stationed in the north and the west of the two provinces are supposed to intercept them. The operation is targeting 2,000 to 3,000 people, including the fighters' families.
Well, South Africa's president blamed NATO for Russia's war in Ukraine and said that he would not join those condemning President Vladimir Putin's offensive. President Cyril Ramaphosa did say he also could not condone the use of force in violation of international law, and that Putin had personally assured him that peace negotiations had made progress. Now, despite not taking sides, the conflict has impacted agriculture in Ramaphosa's nation. Around 40% of South Africa's wheat purchases come from Russia. But farmers in South Africa, are more worried about fruit exports, as our correspondents report.
It's the peak season for apples and pears in South Africa, and the Western Cape province produces most of the country's export fruit. Before the war in the Ukraine, 21% of these pears were headed for Russia. Now the produce will likely end up on local shelves and prices will be forced down. But before the first shots were fired, thousands of tons of fruit had already been shipped.
We have about 800,000 cartons on the water or stuck in European ports or in limbo between the South African ports and the final destination originally for Russia. All fruit kinds. People are scrambling to try and find alternative markets, diverting it to Europe, but then you create a situation of oversupply.
The war will also have an impact on the wheat price, as 40% of South Africa's wheat comes from Russia and the Ukraine. Local wheat farmers like Koos Blankenberg can try to fill the gap in imports, but they say their harvest will also be more expensive.
We've seen a big rise in the wheat price, but we've seen a bigger rise in our import costs. So the rise in the wheat price is not to the benefit of the farmer.
Input costs have doubled, not only because of the rising oil price, but also because South Africa imports 90% of its fertilizer, most of it from Russia. All crop needs fertilizer, including animal feed.
Since the war started and in the previous months or so, we've had a cost increase of 50 cents a litre to produce the milk from this very farm.
In Cape Town, the Western Cape's Minister of Agriculture is struggling to find alternative markets.
So some of these exporters, producers have decided to consider redirecting those ships to Rotterdam and consider it for humanitarian relief, particularly in the region of Poland, and some of these will be distributed also in Ukraine.
But redirecting export fruit is a logistical nightmare, and much of the fresh produce will go to waste before it can be consumed.
Well, the climate and soil of Eswatini makes it ripe for chili cultivation. One Colombian woman seized an opportunity to turn up the entrepreneurial heat by setting up a company that makes hot sauces. Her products now are exported globally. Our team went to have a look.
Claudia Castellanos has fallen in love with the small mountainous kingdom of Eswatini. She left her native Colombia for good to start marketing chili sauce here in 2010. She supplies work to more than 60 farmers, 80% of whom are women.
It is still a very patriarchal society, but I realized very early on that women are the pillars of society.
Chilies grow well here and sell at a healthy market price.
Guess what? I help the needy. I bought myself a new Henke stove. Yes, out of this.
Claudia also relies on the support of a local NGO that trains her producers in permaculture techniques. They're encouraging the wider use of organic farming.
There's sort of a perception that organic produce is for a certain class of people, but that's also kind of driven by the cost of it, the retail cost of it. So if we had more organic producers, then the prices would be more affordable, making it more appealing to everyone.
The peppers are also bottled locally. Claudia has about 20 employees. Here, all the sauces are made by hand. Production has almost doubled in just 2 years, but staying true to her artisanal roots is still a priority for Claudia.
I think a lot of people in the world want to know what they're eating, where the products come from, and who makes them. So I think this part of Black Mamba will never change, even if we have to mechanize some processes to be able to grow.
Global sales of organic products in Africa has increased 5-fold in the past 20 years and are expected to grow much more.
Well, that's it for Eye in Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. Do so again if you can. Till then, take care.